everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, and at long last, the Gohma are pretty much in the game, and I finally get to show them. I love the Gohma, and I'm really excited to show them, and there's a lot to cover in this video, so it'll probably be a little bit longer than most of them, because the Gohma have just a lot of features that none of the other factions have. They introduce a lot of new mechanics and things that haven't been in the game yet. If it wasn't obvious from now, I love the Gohma. They've been there pretty much since the first Zelda games. Like, other than the Moblins, they're like the main enemy force that's just constantly threatened Hyrule, both in canon and in my game too. I really like them, and I like the whole spider aesthetic, and I just think they're really cool. And translating them into a playable faction was a lot of fun, and has been an idea of mine basically since before I even knew how to create things. I've always had the idea of the Gohma as a faction in an RTS game for ages, and now in this engine I'm finally able to bring pretty much all of the ideas to life. Definitely a lot better than they were in the Total War game. I can really utilize some of their unique features in this format versus the Total War format. So God, where to begin? There's a lot to cover. I got a little outline. I'm probably just going to follow that, but I'll just pick one of the heroes. Like all the other factions, they have 4 heroes, and I'll go into more detail on the Gohma heroes in another video. I'll do those with the Kokiri heroes and all the unique units that each hero gets. So, anyway, the Gohma, first up, all of their buildings are organic. And if it wasn't obvious just from looking at them, they shamelessly take a lot from the Zerg from StarCraft as far as how their bases work and the fact that they're completely organic. So there's a lot of shameless idea melding with the Zerg. They're a little bit different than the Zerg, but the comparisons are more than fair. So anyway, their buildings are completely organic and animated, as you can see. This is their central hive core thingy that pumps out all of the blue fog that is now associated with the Gohma in my Zelda game. And they've got the webbing coming out, and then all of this sort of, I guess I'll just call it creep because, kind of like the Zerg, it's probably easier to just describe it as a creep. The Gohma create creep around their buildings, which is needed to build their other buildings on, and I'll get to that in just a second. But one of the advantages to the fact that the Gohma buildings are organic are they can't be captured by enemy forces, so they have to be destroyed. So an enemy can't just bring in a bunch of infantry and then hope to capture this base and then use it against the Gohma. They'd have to burn it to the ground and kill it with fire, basically. But anyway, where should I start first? I guess I will start with how the Gohma make units. Unlike pretty much, I want to say 90% of the factions in the game, there's some other factions that make units differently than just training them from buildings. But the Gohma, they don't train any of their units from their buildings. They actually have little queen here. She's actually not that little. What she does is she goes around and lays eggs, which I will demonstrate right here. She just goes there and lays a little egg. And then you click on the egg and it can morph into one of the various different larvas. I'll go ahead and lay some more eggs now. It's so cool. Yeah, all the Gohma have, pretty much every single Gohma unit has its own animation set, including the buildings, so it took a little while to finish them up. Love that Gohma queen. That's right. That's how the Gohma make units. You click on the queen and you order her to lay eggs, and that's not the only purpose she serves. She's actually a pretty strong combat unit too, so she's able to defend herself if she gets attacked. But what you do is you click on these eggs and then just click on the type of larva you want, which I guess I'll go ahead and do now. I'll train a bunch of the hive larvae, which are they turn into the builders, which I'll get into in just a second. I don't have instant build on. I'll turn instant build on in a little bit after I show you how they build their buildings, because if I have instant build on, it'll skip the whole process. But there, and then their eggs turn into these little larvae here. And then when you want to create a specific unit, you click on the larva, and then there's these little options here. So I'll just turn this one into a builder, and I'll make 2 builders, and I'll turn the other 3 into ranged units. Oh, I'll turn 1 into a ranged unit. I'll have her lay some more eggs. I just love that. I'm finally able to do that, have the Gohma Queen actually lay eggs. Was not able to do that in Medieval 2 at all. I like the sound effects I was able to get to. They're all from Ocarina of Time, the same sound effects the Gohma Queen made in that game. Anyway, after she's done with that egg, I will show the builders. So the Gohma, they also build buildings slightly differently. Their worker unit that gathers resources actually is not their builder, so these little guys right here, these are like their gatherers. You send them to gather resources. But these guys can't build buildings. They're completely unarmed and they can't attack, and their sole purpose is to go to bushes and trees and gather the different resources that the Gohmas need. The Gohma actually have a separate unit that is their builder, and it's also a combat unit too, which is these big guys right here. If you look carefully, they have little tiny spawn that like follow them around and help them build the buildings, which is pretty cool. So we'll click on this one here and boss him around. And then the little tiny things under it, they'll follow him around everywhere and help him build. So let's go ahead and build a Gohma building. Now, like the Zerg, the Gohma have to build on this creep here, and if you hover over a building, you'll see this, the little circle, the radius around it. But pretty much you can build up to the edge of the creep, which I'll demonstrate right now. So if you go past, it turns red, and you can't build it at all. You have to build on the creep there. And obviously they have some buildings that can extend the creep. And then the little guys go out with their little webbing, and they start building their buildings. And they start growing out of the ground under the webbing. That's why I have instant build off, so I can kind of show this, instead of it just popping into existence. Yeah, the big guy's commanding all the little guys to weave the webs. You can see them carrying the little web around. And now the building's done. And this one is kind of like their main hive. It's a smaller variation that pumps out the fog and creates more webbing and more creep around it. Hopefully one day I can figure out, I don't want it so that the creep like destroys like vegetation and stuff. I think it'd be a lot cooler if like the vegetation just became like covered in webbing and rocks, because this stuff is basically just like nutrients and webs. It's not actually like it's not really like an infestation that kills other it's not like the undead in Warcraft where it just like decays and kills everything. It's kind of actually like this nutrients that the Gohma buildings absorb in order to survive. So I think it'd look cool if like all the resources and the trees and stuff that were inside the creep like got covered with webbing and stuff. I think that'd be pretty cool. I'll look into that another time, but yeah, that's how the Gohma build their buildings. They can't build off of the creep, they have to build it on the creep. So I'll go ahead and build some houses there. I'll build another one of these over here. Yeah. I think I can turn instant build on. I'll go ahead and do that. So everything just gets built instantly. Alrighty, what should I show next? There's a lot I could do next. I guess I'll show some of their buildings. They have quite a few different buildings that function a bit differently from some of the other factions. So, The Gohma are one of the only factions that doesn't have merchants, so they can't trade with their allies. However, allies can trade with them. They do have a building here called the Recycler. This creepy looking thing right here. Like the marketplace, this thing can convert the different resources into each other. So if you're running low on food, it can convert wood into food at a little bit of a cost. And your allies, if they have merchants, they can send the merchants to this building to trade. So they're not completely useless as allies in a team game. Just the Gohma can't trade with other players because of their nature. They would never trade because they're these bugs that are hell-bent on eating everything. What else could I show? This building right here, most of your unit construction will come from the queen laying eggs, but this building right here, you can garrison queens inside of them, and it can batch lay eggs really fast, so you just hold down the shift key and it can just spam a bunch of eggs. So I have plenty of eggs here. So if you want to like speed up your unit production, you build one of these things and you'd garrison some queens in them, and it can start spitting out eggs by the bucket load, so that's a very handy building to have if you're playing as the Gohma. I guess I will go through their units. So I've already talked about the Queen. She's, at the start of the game, she's basically your most important unit. You use her to create all of the eggs in your other Gohma units, so you definitely don't want to lose her. The Gohma I would classify as like a rushing and a swarm faction. They're designed to play very aggressively, but paradoxically, if an enemy rushes into your base and kills your queen, the Gohma are basically screwed for the rest of the match. So you definitely don't want to lose the queen. You want to keep her safe early on until you have multiple queens, or you build this thing right here to make more eggs to produce more queens. I talked about their builder, the Hive Keepers, these guys here. These guys just build all of their buildings, and they can attack enemies with their little web weavers that follow them around. And then I believe I also talked about their workers here. Just these simple guys that go around collecting resources. So next up, I will go through all of their larvae, I guess. So let me train some of their larvae. Some of the soldier ones are over here. Get down here. I'll bring them out on the dirt so that they stand out a little bit more. Alright, so the Gohma have 4 different types of larvae, and each of these 4 larvae grow into 4 different types of units. Each larva basically represents a different group. Like these guys right here, the hive larvae, these morph into all of their like utility units, like their workers and their builders, and some of their other utility units, which I'll show after I go through the larva. Second up is the soldier larvae, which are the ones based on the design from Ocarina of Time. These are these are basically like Zerglings. They're really, really small, crappy, fast attack units, and they can grow into larger soldier units, basically pure combat units that serve very specific combat functions. So these are your offensive force, or rather the foundation of your offensive units. And this right here is the royal larva, based on the variation from Twilight Princess. This one can morph into all of your support units, so they can also turn into the Gohma Queens here. They can turn into some commander units and things like that. So this is like your support branch of units. These guys have a very, very weak attack. They're not good at attacking, unless you have like 300 of them or something like that. And then the last larva the Gohma have are the giant larvae. These guys morph into all of the really, really giant Gohma units. Basically, they're siege units. So, like, they're the Armagoma and the tanks and some other ones, which I'll show in just a bit when I get to those units. So, guess I will start with the utility ones. Let's see, I've shown the builder. I have a caretaker there, so I'll make that one, and I'll make that one. Well, I forgot to change the sound effects of this guy, so he sounds like a human right now. Hey. That's funny. This one's actually a unique unit available to Agatha, so I'll go into more detail about this unit in the hero video, so we'll just ignore that one and its funny voice for now. So, the Gohma utility units. I talked about the builder. Next up right here is the caretaker. This little guy right here. He is the first ranged unit that the Gohmas get. He basically flings little larvae from its abdomen. I'm gonna make it so that they can pick up and carry eggs. So, like, if your eggs are in the way or your base is getting attacked and you need to run away, you can probably get some of these guys and order them to pick up the eggs and move them somewhere else. So, I think that's gonna be their purpose. They're a light ranged unit and they can move eggs around, which is pretty cool. And then their next utility unit is the janitor, which is these big guys right here. These guys are basically like super workers, kind of. They're very slow moving, but they can carry a lot and they can chop down like trees and bushes really fast. So they're really good at harvesting resources, but they move very slow. So, and they can attack enemies. So unlike the normal workers, which have no attack ability at all, these guys can just snap enemies in half. So they're kind of like a slow support defensive builder, not a builder, a resource gatherer kind of. And they can also carry enemy corpses too. So that feature's not implemented yet, but I'm going to implement something like that. It'll be needed for the undead too, where they can like drag corpses back to the base so that other units can harvest them. So the Gohma will actually be one of the only factions that can gather food from the corpses of their dead enemy. I think that'll be a really awesome feature. But that is the janitor, and I think that is all of their support units, other than this weird talking one right here.
Hey, hey!
I'll put in the proper sound effects when I get around to the hero units. Anyway, the soldier larvae. Let's make all 4 of them. If my theory is right, the one that's unique to Mido probably has the wrong voice set too, but I'll do the other 3 first. Let's see, am I right? Yep, this one has a Hylian voice set too. This one is a unique hero unit to Mido, so I'll go into more detail on this one in the hero video. I have a feeling all 4 of the hero units still have the Hylian voice sets. But anyway, the soldier units for the Gohma, their main infantry, as I would call them, although I guess it's kind of hard to classify bugs as infantry. First up is the pincer Gohma. These little guys. They are based on the very, very first Gohma that ever showed up in the Zelda series, and that design also appeared in the Oracle games. Not both of them. I believe it was Ages. The one in Ages actually had the pincers in the front. In the first Zelda game, it didn't have the pincers, so that's where this design comes from. This is your bread and butter soldier unit, just your basic infantry. There's really nothing too special about them. They're your footmen, your swordsmen, your orc warriors. They're just a simple combat unit. They're basically a buffed up version of the larva, and you just send them in masses to hack up enemy soldiers. Next up is the Spinal Gohma, which is one of my favorite designs. It's a completely custom design. It's not based on... well, it's loosely based on the Magtails, which are actually a separate race in the canon of my game. They kind of have a sort of centipede thing going on, or like a pseudo-scorpion thing going on, but they're mostly a custom design. And these guys are basically their spearmen. They have like this really large, tongue that extends, and they can use it to stab enemies from far away like a spear. So these are your anti-cavalry unit that if your enemy's sending cavalry at you, you send these guys in to beat up their cavalry. Or if you just want a unit with a bit of distance, you can have these guys behind like your pincer Gohma, and their tongues will shoot out and hit the units in front of them. So kind of like a really, really, really short ranged unit, in addition to being a spearman unit too. So they're pretty handy. You'll definitely want these guys in pairs if you can manage it. And then their third soldier unit, returning from Hyrule Total War, is the Shield Gohma. This is a slow-moving defensive unit. Their purpose is to be put into formations with other units, and what they'll do is they'll go in the front of the formation, and they'll use their giant claw to sort of block ranged attacks and piercing attacks. they boost the resistance of your whole army to piercing attacks, basically. So any arrows or ranged units will have a hard time dealing damage to your army if you have a few of these guys in the group. They'll march along and protect your other units. They're pretty durable too. Although, despite the fact that they have this really huge claw, they actually they don't do tons of damage because their attack rate's really slow. Their damage per second's pretty low, despite the amount of damage that they can do. But I like the little animation. You can see the little eye looking around and twitching, which is pretty cool. Same thing with the pincer Gohma with their twitching pincers in the front. I think that's pretty cool. Alright, I think that's it for their soldier units. I will do the royal units next. I've already talked about the queen, so let me make a few more royal larvae so I can show all of them. Alrighty, first is... oh yeah, this one. I like this guy. Took a few seconds to load the textures in there. This guy has the wrong sound effects, I just noticed. I'll fix that pretty much as soon as I'm done with this video. There's that one. Actually, all these guys have the wrong voiceovers. But the unique one does too. No, for once, the hero unit actually has its own voice set, and the regular ones don't. Anyway, I'll talk about the hero unit in the hero video, so I'll send her on over there. So I've already talked about the queen. This lovely lady lays all the eggs, etc., etc. And then the next royal unit they have is the Gohma princess, which sounds like a Gerudo, but will sound like a nice creepy spider later on. This is basically the commander unit for the Gohma. It's got the little aura around it, and it boosts the performance of other Gohma information with it, or basically anything in its aura. So it's the Gohma commander unit, like the Hylian Ironclads and the Gerudo Ashinon captains. It's got the giant eyeball in its butt. And then this one right here is one of my favorite units that the Gohma have. This is the Hive Amplifier, which sounds like it's using the sound set of the Shrine of Courage from the Kokiri. These guys can't attack enemy units, but they have this swarm of little mites that are, you can see the mites like running around it and swarming around it. If an enemy unit tries to attack these guys, the little mites will attack enemy units. So these guys, even though they can't directly attack, if they get surrounded by enemies, they'll constantly deal damage to anything around them. So they're kind of handy in that regard. And another ability that these units have is they'll be able to take control of wild Gohma and other creatures similar to the Gohma, like Tektites. So if you go out into the wilderness and you find like a wild Tektite hopping around, these guys will have an ability that can take control of them. So they basically enslave other Gohma-like creatures into the hive, which is a very handy ability on certain maps. It's a bit situational, but handy nonetheless. I said I'd talk about the hero royal unit in another video, so I'll do that. And then lastly are the giant larvae, so let me make some of those. And all of their giant siege units and their cavalry unit too. Do their cavalry unit first, which thankfully has its own sound set. Do the tank Gohma next. Probably one of my favorite Gohma units. And the Arma Gohma. Another really cool unit that is using the Gerudo sound set, unfortunately. Behold, the only time you'll hear talking Gohma. And then their unique unit, which probably also has a Hylian voice set. Nope! It actually has the proper sounds. This one is another unique hero unit, which I'll show in another video. So I'll move that one along over there. Alrighty, so I like the walking sound effects that I was able to add in. Well, technically, I didn't get the sounding effects to work. I can't remember his name, but another person added the ability to have walking sounds in. So a shout out to them. I'm sorry I don't remember your name. I'll go ahead and add the name into the credits of the video if you want to be recognized for your efforts. But the Gohma just, it helps a lot that they all have their walking sound effects. You can hear like the little crunchy sounds that they make when they walk. Anyway, the first of the Gohma's large units is actually their one cavalry unit, the Gohma Longlegs, which is one of my favorite units too. This design is actually based on, I'll go ahead and throw up a little overlay on the video right here. It's based on the beta design in Twilight Princess for one of the Gohma bosses, which probably ended up turning into Arma-Gohma, but I thought in the trailer that design looked so cool, and I couldn't wait to see it in the game, and it never showed up. It really carries that sort of spooky vibe from Ocarina of Time when you fight the Gohma Queen, where like the room is really dark and you can kind of barely see anything, and there's just this giant glowing eye and like these vague legs moving around. It's really cool. There's really nothing like that in Zelda anymore. It's one of the reasons I've kind of lost interest in the series. There's nothing really threatening or menacing in Zelda anymore, which is, I guess that's one of the reasons I really like the Gohma. They're so just malevolent and threatening. I don't even think there's Gohma in the new Zelda game in Breath of the Wild. There's no Gohma in Skyward Sword. Maybe that's why those two games suck, because there's no Gohma in them. Just add Gohma to your Zelda game and it makes it awesome, I guess. Anyway, the Gohma Longlegs, this is their cavalry unit. It's a really, really, really fast-moving unit. It's very large for a cavalry unit too, although don't let its size fool you, because these guys are actually pretty weak considering how big they are. They're more so used for their speed in order to keep up with other cavalry units used by other factions. But just 2 or 3 spearmen could tear this guy apart, so don't think this giant creepy unit you can just make like 10 of them and go stomping around wiping everything out, because these guys are actually pretty weak considering how big they are. They're more of a sort of psychological, I guess, unit. Like, I imagine, you know, if someone has arachnophobia and 20 of these come running into their base and they're all creeping around, they'd probably just lose their shit and not be able to react to them. But I really like the way this unit looks. I like the animations for them. I like how they kind of bounce around when they're idle. And I just like how creepy they are. And then next up, one of my favorite Gohmas, the Tank Gohma. Gohma Tank, however you want to call it. These big giant guys. This is their melee siege unit. Basically a giant elephant, but in spider form. This thing can damage a bunch of units in front of it. It's got splash damage. It's really good against walls and buildings, so a few of these can knock down turrets pretty easily. They're one of the only Gohma units that's actually pretty strong, so they're pretty expensive. Unless you're just overwhelmed with resources, you'll probably only have like a handful of them in your army, like 2 or 3, but they're pretty valuable. I would say their next unit is a little more powerful and useful, but I just prefer these guys because of the way they attack. I really like how they just rip things apart with their claws and like ram into things. And then the last Gohma siege unit, which is actually a proper siege unit without the proper sounds, is the Arma-Gohma from Twilight Princess. These guys are a ranged siege unit. Like the Arma-Gohma in that game, they're able to like secrete this fluid from their eye that ignites into fire, and then they attack with like a giant fire beam from a distance. So these guys are basically Gohma trebuchets or catapults. They don't need to deploy or anything, which is pretty handy. They can just fire right after they walk into position. So you want a few of these guys to siege enemy bases from a distance and do some nice fire damage. I like the animations. I like the twitching eye and everything. I think that's most of the Gohma units, other than the 4 hero units. Again, I'll go into more details on them in another video. I'm trying to think if I missed any units. I did show their Titan in another video, but I'll go ahead and build their Wonder, because their Wonder's pretty cool. Let me just extend their base right here a little bit. Get these guys out of the way. I'll go ahead and send some of their units out to attack in a bit. I'll train a little army. Anyway, the Gohma Wonder is, if you played A Link to the Past, you'll probably recognize it. I'll let it build here first. There you go. Oh yeah, instant build's on, so it's going to finish really fast. Yeah, finish really fast. Anyway, the Gohma Wonder. For those that don't recognize it, it is the Eyes of Vitreous from A Link to the Past. The creature at the base of the Misery Mire that probably was responsible for that swamp. In the canon of Hyrule Conquest, it's basically the creature that created the Gohma. It was destroyed by the First Sages, and when it was destroyed, parts of its body were, you know, ripped off, and basically each of its 7 eyes fell out, and each grew into a different creature. One of them grew into the Matriarch, which is one of the Gohma heroes, and basically became the modern Gohma. One of them fell off and became Argus, and then one of them fell off and became Vitreous, which kind of just, I don't want to say it slept, but it kind of just like lurked underground in the Misery Mire for probably hundreds of thousands of years, until the Gohma reincorporated it into their hive, and they use it to create their Titan, which is a resurrected version of their creator, which I've shown in another video, but I'll go ahead and show again because it's awesome. I freaking love this thing. It's so cool. This thing is just awesome. If you can figure out where the design is kind of based on, it's actually an amalgamation of one of the Gohma heroes and the original creature that created the Gohma. But if you know what it's based on, kudos to you. Let's see, what else was it going to show? Yeah, I was going to show a giant battle with a bunch of Gohma attacking an enemy base. So I'll go ahead and make a bunch of larvae. I'm just going to spam tons of eggs. So let's go crazy with eggs. I'll make some pincer Gohma. I love the sounds that they make when you walk. Some more eggs. I'll go ahead and make some more of the little larvae. Well, what other units do I want to send into the fight? Yeah, I think that's good enough for now. The enemy AI is disabled, so their base is probably going to be pretty small, just the starting base, so this fight won't be too exciting. I'll go ahead and show some more battle stuff in a later video. This video is mainly just to show the Gohma and all of their features. I love these guys. I'll go ahead and send the Titan too. Gohma are just so cool. I love the Titan. I think, other than Majora and probably King Oshus, this is probably the largest Titan that's going to be in the game. Kind of like with their cavalry unit. Don't let its size fool you, though. It can be brought down with magic and especially fire. Like, fire attacks can bring this thing down pretty fast, so it's not invincible, despite the fact that it's absolutely huge. There you go, marching through the little forest here. That poor camel. Love these things. I'm so happy to see these guys in the engine finally. I love this thing, just walking over all these trees. It's so cool. None of this was possible in Medieval 2. None of it. So we'll send a little guy to go scout for the base, which should be somewhere up here. Poor little larva is probably gonna die. It's their lot in life. Yeah, there's the territory ring. Just love this thing, it's so cool. I think my sound cut out for a second there. There we go. The sound cut out for a second there, that was kind of jarring. Kill those filthy Gerudos. Go siege that base there. Awesome. I love these things. Let's just send everything to attack. The Titan might take out the building before they even get there. I think the tank's gonna die before they destroy it. Alrighty. Well, there's the end of that. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to show before I wrap up this video. I think I've shown pretty much all the Gohma stuff. I love these spiders. Anyway, that's pretty much the Gohma. I hesitate to say they're my favorite faction. I think I might have said that in one of my other videos. They're definitely in like the top 5 or 3. They're pretty close to the top. I would say they're my favorite as far as their like aesthetic and their kind of nature. I really like the fact that they're pretty alien, especially like their physiology. Like they're these giant spider things. They're not bipeds. They've got, some of them have like even more than 8 limbs. They have tons of limbs. Their buildings are all organic. They're just really cool looking. Their behavior is pretty cool. They sound cool. Like everything about them's cool. Their music is awesome. You'll hear the music in the background as I'm talking. I really like their soundtrack. Just the mood of the Gohma is just it's pretty awesome. I'd say it's one of my favorites. There's a few other factions that are contenders though. I have a feeling people will probably like Majora a little bit more. Majora's got a really cool aesthetic and a mood going on. Everyone seems to love Majora though, and I love Majora also. Majora is just such a cool antagonistic force. Like I said, there's just nothing really creepy in Zelda anymore. Majora's probably where it peaked before they started going back into Candyland. Like Majora is just absolutely terrifying, and I can't wait to I might animate and put the Majora Titan in the game just to show it. I might do a little video next before I get to the Gohma and Kokiri heroes, just because I really want to show Majora. I think Majora's gonna look really cool with the smoke and everything, and just all the tentacles. It's gonna be one of the most complex things I've had to animate ever, so it'll be really cool. So I might do that. I might just save that for another time, just so that the anticipation can build over the years until I finally get to Majora's faction. So next video will probably be the 4 Kokiri and Gohma heroes, as well as the hero units associated with those heroes. After that, I will probably work on another cinematic, which will take me a month or two, depending. And then after that, I will get to the next 2 factions, which are Ordana Province and Lanayru Province, the 2 provinces. They're a little less weird than the Gohma and the Kokiri as far as their gameplay styles go. So after the Gohma, the next few factions will dive back into sort of more normalcy. Like Ordana is kind of similar to the Kingdom of Hyrule, although they do have a few pretty big differences as far as how they gather their resources. But their base building is similar to the Hylians, and they're humans, so they're walking bipeds, so they're aesthetically not as alien as some of the other factions. So I hope you guys think the Gohma look awesome. I really look forward to getting the Kokiri and the Gohma all wrapped up and out for you guys to play. I think this is where the game really starts showing some of its more unique features. The first 4 factions were kind of I don't want to use generic, although the Kingdom of Hyrule is definitely pretty generic, but they're generic by design. They're supposed to be like the ease you into the game kind of faction, but we're now at the point where the factions are just going to start going completely off the wall, and some of them are going to be completely bizarre, like, what's an example? The River Zora are going to be really cool, although they're still a ways off. They're going to have mobile buildings. All their buildings can walk around, because they're all on the backs of giant Octoroks, so the River Zora will be really cool. It's a really, really long way off, but the naval, the ocean, all the ocean factions for the Great Sea are going to be pretty awesome, like the Perella. The Perella are going to be pretty great, but those ones are still a pretty long way off. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like my work, if you think everything's shaping up to be pretty cool, I have a link to my Patreon in the description. Go ahead and check it out. Just, you know, $1 or $2 helps. Any little bit helps. I'd love to be able to work on this full time. I'm not working on it full time yet, although I'm pretty close, so maybe in the next few months I'll get to that point where I can just devote all my time to this finally. But anyway, thank you for watching this video on the Gohma. Hopefully they look cool, unless you have arachnophobia, and stay tuned for the next video, and I hope you guys have a good one.